The NFLPA's rankings, I think it just goes right along with the stuff I've been saying. In terms of the Steelers, aren't Rooney the second? There's just some underlying concerns that I think are a bigger deal than people realize, and it's starting to really show itself as we move forward and we get further away from Dan Rooney.
I agree. The Steelers are not in the Super Bowl. They're not winning playoff games because of the locker room. If they had really, really comfortable seats, man, I think they would have won at least two playoff games the last few years. Welcome back to episode 9 of Out of Town Yinzers. I'm Joe alongside Justin. We're talking Steelers, Pirates, Pens, and Pitt. So crack a beer, sip a latte. We'll get right into it. And today we're talking about the negative NFLPA survey that has now been an annual recurrence for the Steelers. They get a lot of F report cards. Me and Justin haven't seen too many of those. Our parents wouldn't allow it, but the Steelers have seen plenty. The owner have seen the most. What's your thoughts?
So they got a couple F minuses. I didn't even know that was a possibility to get an F minus. I don't know how that
I don't think it
works.
is.
Yeah, so
Sounds
there were
made up.
two or three. Yeah, so there were two or three. The field being probably the biggest one. Your take is probably accurate in that I don't think anyone who's following this really should be shocked. I think if you just look at it on its face value, there probably are people that are seeing this thinking, oh, the Steelers last, the Dolphins first. How does that make any sense? And to your point, maybe that does show how, you got to take some of this with a grain of salt. But yeah, there are some things that are, like I said, already, I think there are some underlying issues with the Rooneys or Art the Second here. There's just some weird, I don't know if it's, again, I think a lot of it is, just the record to your point and things like that. But there just feels like there's some underlying things here and they are maybe creeping into the rest of the organization. So clearly you disagree, but yeah, some of these things, again, it's bigger picture for me. It's looking at everything from a 1,000-foot view. I'm just getting concerned a little bit with the organization as a whole.
I think both things can be true. I think you can say that the Rooneys are cheap. They're not putting money that other teams would be spending hand over fist into the Steelers. I think that's just part of how they got their wealth. The Rooneys got their wealth by having the Steelers. The people who are putting a ton of money into their programs and teams got their money a lot of different ways, but usually not through just owning the team. So they don't have that extra cash to kind of run through. I think that's really the bottom line of why things are the way they are, why they take a little bit longer to do things of that nature. The biggest thing for me, though, is they're not losing players. Players want to come here in free agency that they target. They're resigning the players that they want to resign. So when it comes to things of that nature, that's what it comes down to. Are you getting the players? Does it impact your player acquisition and retention? In my case, for the Steelers, it doesn't. I think a lot of that has been Mike Tomlin has made this a desirable place to come and stay. He got that elusive A in the Steelers report card. So now they're moving on from Mike Tomlin to a Mike McCarthy. So to your point, maybe that'll show the cracks of the Steelers organization a little bit more than what we've seen. Maybe Mike Tomlin's been covering that up, but I really don't think that's the case. I think it's all relative when you're talking NFL players. Some of those college locker rooms are absolutely insane. Players are taking a step down when they come to Pittsburgh
Right.
a lot of times in facilities. So, it matters, but it doesn't.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is, the Pitt's locker room in reality is actually better than the Steelers, especially at the training facility. But like that's also kind of it's from the era, before NIL when you were basically saying our facilities, are they better or not? And that was a big thing. And nowadays, you're going to see less and less of that even in college. So I think you're right with that. I do think that at the end of the day, if you're paying players, things like that, like they show on a report card, but at the end of the day, it matters. It does matter. But things like locker rooms and they weight these things equally. They're not all weighted equally. Like some of these things that are on these report cards are not super relevant to your point. And some of the things that they are addressing the field. I've read articles as to why, but like the Eagles had the exact same situation and they haven't seemed to have the same issue. A lot of that goes to the high school games that are being played there, but it seems like they're already trying to fix that. So some of these things, again, I think, I'd be interested to see if the Steelers over the last 7 years had won playoff games where some of these, all of a sudden the field wouldn't have been as big of a deal and it probably gets a better rating and some things like that. So to your point, I do agree with you on a lot of that. Like some of these things do fix themselves when you start to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that matters much more to the Steelers right now are the players and the player acquisition aspect. And like we had talked about last week, it was a big week for that with the NFL Combine and the wide receivers running times. It was going to move people up and down the draft. What were your big takeaways from the NFL Combine from a
So
Steelers
more
perspective?
high, yeah, from the Steelers' perspective. So higher level, I do think some of the biggest takeaways are often the information that comes out. I mean, you have a lot of NFL people, a lot of GMs, a lot of scouts together, going to dinner, getting drinks. A lot of info starts leaking out. It did not. So Matthew Berry's column will be out by the time that this airs, but that's a really good column to read just because he does hit on some of the stuff and he's willing to share things I think some other reporters wouldn't. So there's some stuff like that. From the Steelers' perspective, not meeting with Chris Bell and Brazell was notable to me. The two receivers I thought for sure the Steelers might be in on. Very, very, there's a lot that goes, behind the scenes with those two prospects, but I was surprised to see that. The Broderick Jones response from Omar Khan, I thought was telling. We talked a little bit about this. I'm a little bit more worried about his injury now. The more
Dive
I
into
read
that
into
for a
it, the
second because I
more,
think that was a key point in general, and it
yeah.
really already
So
puts a big cloud on that draft pick.
yeah, so I think we already had some doubts. He was starting to play a little better last year, and he's been very hit or miss at times for the Steelers. That is a really important. Him hitting could make me feel completely different about their last couple. I feel good about their last couple drafts, but he really is a swing pick where he could take the picks from being like an A over the last 3 years, the drafts, to like maybe like a C plus or a B minus, depending on what he does. So Omar Khan's comments depend. You had to read into them, but essentially I'm reading then that this injury may be a little bit more severe than we maybe thought. Looking back, it occurred against the Bears. It was a neck, and it was kind of a situation where a guy kind of jumped up, landed on him, and then threw him, to the side. Next, there's certain types of injuries. The Ravens are dealing this right now with Matabuke. They can be a little bit more serious, and I'm getting a little bit worried. You're seeing tackles mocked to them. Maybe it's just the timing, but I'm getting a little bit worried about that Broderick Jones injury. What were your? I don't know if you took that a little bit different, but
Yeah, just it sucks. I mean, there's really no other way around it. When you think about kind of the roster build and the way that they were trying to do it while still trying to find a quarterback some other way, you take a Broderick Jones. That's kind of why I've continually say, if you're going to take swings, like take him at quarterback, because like you could take take an offensive tackle in the first round if they were to take that again this year. I couldn't even imagine that. That'd be like 3 offensive tackles in the last 5 years in the first round. Like that'd be wild without the return. So I think that's the most damning thing when you talk about Project Jones now is it obviously rules out the 5th-year option. You're not going to do a 20-year, 5th-year option for that or 20 million 5th-year option for that. And really, this is his last year where he's supposedly going to be a cheap, productive tackle. And now his start of the season is probably in jeopardy at this point. If you're talking about being in jeopardy at the start of the season in March, that's probably the worst type of long-term injury, like you said, in general. And it just hasn't been a player that's overachieved either. So for him to
right.
kind of overcome an injury in the offseason and get better at his craft, it's just tough to do both. It's one of those things that I kind of call it right now. I feel like if Broderick Jones is going to be a above average offensive tackle in the NFL, there's probably a better chance it's not going to happen with the Steelers.
Yeah, I think and again, maybe we're reading into it too. They have all the info. We don't have the info. Like we don't know medically where he's at, but I am getting worried. But again, maybe he is better. It's just those comments were a little concerning. Like
He's
you said,
young.
he is. Yeah, he is definitely young. That's important. Just those necks, foots with feet with feet injuries with running backs concern me or receivers. So it's just that type of thing does worry me when it comes to longevity, especially with a lineman. Something like an injury like that.
I think the other
Some of
thing,
the other
Omar.
things.
Sorry, go ahead. You go.
Yeah. So some of the other things that stood out to me, just in general, some of the number every year, like some of these numbers, like the tight ends, that there were basically the two most athletic tight ends, excluding Kyle Pitts that we've ever seen in a combine or since at least dating back 23 years. Those numbers are just ridiculous. I do think there's something to be said that these guys are clearly, they go and train for 3 months, preparing for this or 2 months preparing for this. And that, that's relevant. Like they learn how to test, but still, like some of those numbers with those tight ends, Taylon Green, I think I saw a stat. He would have been top 3 receiver of all time from a relative athletic score perspective if he tested at receiver and he's a quarterback.
He's not
So
a
that was
quarterback,
just
but yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah,
No,
maybe a
yeah,
quarterback.
probably not.
And I love
But
that you're talking
yeah,
about the tight
just
ends. I could almost I can see it now. You know, Justin's trading away all the Steelers edge players and then drafting even more tight ends. He really knows how to
the
do
one
roster building. So I love it.
those are the two positions they don't need in this draft. But no, I mean, it just stood out to me because those were two of the most ridiculous numbers that you're going to see in a draft. The running backs all fast. I think they said fastest 40 times for a running back position ever, which was
Running backs
pretty
showed
wild to
out
see.
more
But
than I
again,
expected for sure. I think
they did. Yeah,
they
yeah,
were arrow
yeah,
up on that group when it wasn't supposed to be a great year. You know, outside of Love, that is. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
His
you know the
teammates,
so I just think I was really focused on the receivers the most when it comes down to it, and there was certainly a few that had, you know, stock up, arrow up aspects to them. I think Casey Concepcion, we were talking about going into, is a good fit for the Steelers in terms of kind of rounding out the skill set on their wide receiver room. I love that. I love like a Deion Burks with his 4.3. I love like a Skylar Bell that had the big vert and a 4.4 number, that explosion aspect of that. So when you kind of talked about Chris Bell for Louisville, I feel like a Skylar Bell for UConn is probably a stronger prospect for me for the Steelers. I did like Brazell too. You know, I think we kind of talked about it before, but you know, having those tall guys that could stretch the field. You know, I think some of the people that was out on a little bit before, but I think I'm even more out on now, or like a Malachi Fields. I think Denzel Boston at 21 would be disappointing at this point, and some things along those lines. So I think that's kind of where my head's at. I was looking at those receivers. I think that I like the group still. And I think the last thing for that is that there is a clear top three as there was going
right?
into the combine. I think that is held true. So if the Steelers could somehow get one of those top three, that's the win. But there's definitely plenty of depth for them to double dip.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably be going like in depth, especially on the receivers is the most important position by far for the Steelers, and it is fun. Like we talked about last week, it is fun. Receiver is my favorite position, I think, in general, but certainly from a draft perspective, there's just so much that goes into it. The metrics matter the most of any position, and then the tape. It's like a good combination of tape and metrics, which is interesting. Yeah, so Boston not running the 40 is concerning. I'm starting to hear more and more that his 40 might be very similar to Malachi Fields, which if you're taking a receiver in the first round, that's a huge concern. So it'll be interesting to see from now till the draft where his stock goes. I guess this is looking into it, but his gauntlet was actually slower than Fields. Like there's some things like that that are starting to creep. And again, this is what we were talking about. This is where the separation, the moving starts to happen with the position. Yeah, I'm higher on Brazell than I was before. Trying to get over the fact that he's at Tennessee and their offense is a little quirky for receivers, to say the least. You see a guy like a Jalen Hyatt come into the league, and you don't know how to project that. So, but I mean, you see those numbers, 6'4", as big as he is, running a 4.37 is just wild. So I'm coming around on him. This is what happens. You start, you see these numbers and you see things, you talk yourself in or out of certain guys. We're fully into draft season, so I'm excited about that for sure. My hot take is actually I'm a little bit disappointed in when I really we'll get into this next week. I'm a little bit disappointed in the receiver group overall when you really sit down and break down player by player. Like you look at a Tate, I agree with you. The top three to me are kind of far and away. There's some weird stuff going on with Malachi Lemon in his interviews, but I think that is really peak draft season teams, weird stuff getting around and more so that than anything. But I am a little bit disappointed in certain pockets of the receiver group. I also do think this is more of a take on this draft. I think the top three, which completely agree with you, they're their own tier. I think in most drafts, they're going in the 10 to 20 range, as opposed to Tate being what seems like a locked in top 10. That's not a knock on Tate. I think it's more just this draft's a little weird in that after the first pick, I think it's kind of a toss up and you got a giant tier. Whereas maybe in some years there's more quarterbacks, which is really the case, and it pushes some guys down. So not a knock on them. I think receivers are maybe getting pushed up a little bit because of the rest of the draft. There's pockets of the draft that are just odd this year.
No, just like you scouted the Tennessee helmet, dude, scouting the Ohio State helmet is a real thing with Carnell Tate. And it's for real, though, because like what misses have come out of that school? You would probably say Marvin Harrison Jr. is the only one, and like he's a solid player.
Yeah, and I think he could be fine. He'll be fine. I don't like the helmet scout. I think that's really just the receivers at Ohio State really are just that good. And they've all been that good, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
I think Tate's getting a bump a little bit with the Ohio State. Hasn't missed coming out of that room because it is a little bit down on that high end wide receiver this year. There isn't that slam
If
dunk
he's getting a
top
bump,
end
I would
thing.
actually argue it's because he had so many good matchups with Jeremiah Smith, basically taking 1 to 2 safeties, literally 2 safeties in certain highlights that I've watched at times. You might not be wrong, but I do think I think he's in that Olave tier. But again, that's kind of my point is, look at where did Olave go? 19 his year,
Yeah.
and then you got Tate. I can't imagine Tate gets past 9 this year. So
Yeah. I think we're saying the same thing when it comes to that.
yeah. So last thing, did you want to jump in a big week upcoming here with the tampering periods next Monday, and then you got officially free agency starts Wednesday, but we all know it really starts Monday with the tampering periods. Wanted to jump in and maybe give a prediction for one free agent we think the Steelers maybe can and or should sign. I'll jump in right away. Say Jaquan Brisker. Now, yes, he is from Pittsburgh. Yes, it does seem like everyone has to have a connection to Pittsburgh that they bring in or sign right now, but no, that has nothing to do with me saying that. I do think he would fill not just a need, but he fills a need in a position I don't think they want to spend draft capital on. So it would be a nice combination of the two. I think they could sign him for a reasonable number. You could say the same. Cam Curl would be in a similar, at safety, could be a similar player they would sign. But I do really like Jaquan Brisker. I'm coming from Chicago. The only knock on him is injury, which is ironic because the only other safety really the Steelers have is Deshaun Elliott, and he's coming off of an injury. But I would be happy if they signed Jaquan Brisker. And I think it's a realistic signing for them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think when you think about the Steelers free agency, I think they're going to add on the offensive line at some point, probably a guard. The Broderick Jones thing would change the tackle aspect. So I think that's a signing they're going to have. You're going to add to the running back room. So I think that's either going to be a Kenny Gainwell or it's going to be somebody else similar to that. So I think those are the free agents that I would bring
Maybe an
in on
Aaron
the offensive
Jones.
side. Yeah, yeah. I love a Romeo Dobbs type level wide receiver in kind of that aspect. But I think the one that I would say that would be most exciting to me would be a trade-in sign of a Trent McDuffie. If you could get someone like that
Oh,
from the
okay.
Chiefs to kind of come in and be on that back end secondary for the Steelers, be opposite Joey Porter. Kind of that's where you start to put your money in the defense is in some of your corners. I'm perfectly fine with that, and that would be awesome. A kind of roster build and really help the pieces start to fall together on where the holes are for the Steelers as well.
All right. Next up, we're going to jump into the Pirates. We're going to talk everyone's favorite topic at this point. We're going to talk Konnor Griffin just in general, what to expect from him, odds of re-signing him, things like that. So, Joe, Mr. Pirate, if you want to start us off here.
I hate that you said odds resigning right away. I know we had it as an aspect, but I didn't think it was going to be mentioned off the top. But the thing about Connor Griffin that I'm so excited about is what everybody else is so excited about. I mean, come on, like this is the one time where the national media is just as hyped as people within Pittsburgh, and those things don't align very often when it comes to the Pirates. So I think the thing that I kind of wanted to chat about and really, I think this could be more of a conversation than kind of me coming through. But Connor Griffin is one that's whether or not he starts with Pittsburgh in April, he will absolutely be in Pittsburgh in the first half of this year. You can just see all of the signs for that. When I say kind of what to expect for Connor Griffin, my line, when I would call it out of my expectations, and this would be the low end. So the low end of Connor Griffin this year would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 220 to 250 batting average, 15 to 20 homers, over 30 stolen bases, and play a solid shortstop. So I think that would be the low end for Connor Griffin. And when you're thinking about that, why would he not be in the majors right now?
I definitely I saw. Did you see his rookie of the year odds skyrocketed as soon as he had the home runs? He's now the favorite solely because of what's happening in spring training. That's pretty wild to see, but makes sense. I was a little surprised, with all the hype that his odds were where they were a few weeks ago. So you're saying that's the low end. What do you think's a realistic expectation? Is there like a specific and again, maybe you want to hold off on this? Is there a specific, would you say, hey, over under, batting average, over under stolen bases, home runs? Is there a number you would say this is where I would put it if I'm Vegas?
Yeah, I mean the batting average is tough when you think about it, just because of the way that Major League Baseball is now. So that'll be
Right.
lower than you'd think, but it kind of is in line with what you'd expect. So I think in the 250 range, I think his batting average on balls in play is going to be above average. So I think that'll help him a lot. He doesn't strike out as much as some other prospects, but he definitely has some swing and the miss. And he's a younger player. But I think the over under on home runs has got to be at least 15. I think he could get into 20. You've seen that already. He can run into it. He's a huge kid. 30 stolen bases, I think, is easy. He had over 60 last year in the minors. So I think it's one of those, it's just the numbers from that perspective are just going to be off the charts. When you compare what Konnor Griffin could do to what some people have done, there have been some pretty tremendous teenage seasons in Major League Baseball. And it's really to the point where if you're getting a cup of coffee or if you're getting legit playing time as a teenager in Major League Baseball, you're legit coming out. And I think that's kind of how it played out. So you got Juan Soto debuted in 2018. He went 292, 406, 517 with 22 home runs. So over a 900 OPS. That would be the absolute upper edge of what Konnor Griffin could do. And Juan Soto is doing that at a non-premium defensive position. That's the other thing. Konnor
Right.
Griffin's going to be playing shortstop doing this. You got Bryce Harper in 2012, won Rookie of the Year at 19, 22 home runs, over a 5 WAR. Fee back in 89. So this shows you just there's not that many players that have even done this. Debuted at 19, hit 16 home runs while playing, elite defense. So I think that's kind of that Griffey year would probably be, everything came true for Konnor Griffin, but it's not like this is his MVP season. Like that'll be a couple years down the line.
Right. And this is funny what you just said at the non-premium position. I think that's the big piece here for the Pirates. I was talking to our number 2 fan this weekend about the Pirates, and I think that's the cheat for the Pirates and the code for them is if you can get this year, if you can get the production we're hoping from the shortstop and center field positions, that's like an equalizer. Yes, we're, playing with the money we're playing with, but I think that's the way the Pirates hit their ceiling for sure. So now, the one thing too, so I keep seeing this talked about. So Konnor Griffin would be the first teenager since Griffey to start the year in the majors, correct?
I don't think that's necessarily true. Didn't Julio Rodriguez that might be true. I don't know that for sure.
Again, it's something I've
We'll
seen
fact
brought
check
up
that
on
after the
Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, again, regardless, the fact that I don't know that people realize it's as rare as what he could be doing is as rare as it is. Again, certainly people like that are in baseball, but I think Pirates fans and Pittsburgh fans in general, I don't know if people realize how rare what he could be about to do, or even just starting the season this way, how rare it is.
It's truly tremendous because it just feels surreal because you already have someone who's so rare in Paul Skeens. So to have
Right.
two guys come back to back almost makes it feel like this isn't true. Like we already have Paul Skeens. This just happened. Like it's not going to happen again, and it's
Right.
happening in exactly the right place that you'd want it to happen. I'm just so excited. They're 8-2. They're leading, best record in baseball in spring training right now. Putting
Yeah.
up runs. The pitching staff looks great. That number 5 starter looks great. Whoever it's going to end up being. So, man, the good vibes are just continue to come from Bradenton.
Really, to your point, like having Skeens and what we think we might have in Griffin, it doesn't feel real in a way. Like I'm not used to feeling this way whatsoever about the Pirates. It's one thing to feel that way in the season when you're having a good season. Not that we've seen many of those, but I don't know that I've ever felt this way about like potential with the Pirates, with multiple players on a team. And I love the mid 2010 teams. And you kind of saw that coming, and there was kind of a lead up to that. But just it's so fun when you have a team like we talked about this with the Penguins when they were early on in their run, when you have young guys and it feels like there's actual potential and you don't know what the ceiling is. It's just so fun. I've literally never in my lifetime felt that way about the Pirates, and I'm starting to allow myself to feel that way, I guess is the big thing. So try not to get hurt. You're getting me you're getting me close to where I'm ready to be hurt again, I guess.
My heart will be broken, but I'm okay with that. I open it up every year. I'm a
Yeah.
perpetual heartbroken aspect when it comes to the Pirates. The thing that's most exciting about baseball, though, is the playoffs. And I think that's why people bang on the drum that baseball has parity because they have different teams that make the World Series or win the World Series. But we all know that there's pretty much the same type of teams that make the playoffs. And if you spend a lot more money, you have a much better chance. So when people talk parity from a Pittsburgh standpoint, that's what they mean. If people talk parity in terms of who wins championships because of the randomness of the playoffs for Major League
Right.
Baseball,
Yep.
that's real too. And that's why it's so exciting for a Pirates team to get into the playoffs when you have a Paul
Right.
Skeens in their rotation. If you get enough bats for a couple big hits, man, you can really get rolling. And I think the flip side of that is like an NHL playoffs, which is such a slog that you really have to be a good team or have a goaltender completely stand on its head to make a deep
Mhm.
run in the playoffs there.
Yeah, there's definitely some randomness, but that's what you're absolutely right about. It's funny, you hear these people that are like carrying water for Major League Baseball, and they're like, "Well, look how how much parity." It's like there's just parity because once you get in, anyone can win because that's the sport. It's not because the Dodgers aren't dominating, and it's that's the Dodgers are the obviously the outlier here in general, but the reason they have to have a long season is because the sport itself, game to game, is so even. So if you make the playoffs, anyone can make a run. And that's what, to your point, that is what's exciting. If the Pirates get into the playoffs, they can make a run. So, like I said, I'm starting to open up, ready to be heard again, I
Yeah.
guess.
If you think about baseball in general, the reason why they have as long of a season is it is a game that they can play that many games and survive as athletes. And early on, baseball is the oldest sport out there. They played a shit ton of games when they were in the 1920s, 30s, when that was the only way they made money was at the gates. So,
Right.
I
Yep.
think there's kind of a
Yep.
historical aspect of why the season is double what, the NBA is, which is probably too long
Yeah.
by itself, too.
Right. Agreed. So the last thing we wanted to touch on, just in general, there's been a lot of talk this week about possibly making Konnor Griffin some, which again would be essentially unprecedented, but making him some contract offers. What's your take in general? What do you think is realistic? What do you think the chances are of them actually signing him?
So my take is this is not a no-go. So I feel like the Paul Skeens aspect, I think he was always going to hold out, let him play through. But Connor Griffin's a different ball game for that. He's, 19. He can sign a contract right now for 8 years, and he's only 26, 27 when he's getting that second big contract kind of right in his heyday. So for his timing, because he's starting his clock so early, it makes this much more attractive for him on his side. So it always takes both sides to come to the table here. I think
Right.
Connor Griffin would actually come to the table on this type of deal. Now, that's the first part. The second part is it's going to take a lot of money to make it happen. And that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 140, 150 million for 8 years is kind of where I would say the Pirates would have to be at to close that deal. And I think it's one of those that just makes a lot of sense on both sides. Well, I said, if you give a 19-year-old 140 million guaranteed, when you talk about setting someone up for life, it doesn't get any more than that. When you think about it, it'd be hard in that sense if you make a sweet enough offer for Connor Griffin to turn it down. And for the Pirates, that's one of those that it spreads out over 8 years. So it's not 140 million over 3 years. You just made a huge offer for Kyle Schwarber. So we talked a few weeks ago about, that aspect. So it says that there is some money there when you come down to it. And really, this is someone you just got to take the chance on. They tried to do it with Brian Hayes. They tried to do it with Gregory Polanco. They tried to do it with other players. It didn't work out. It did work out with Andrew McCutchen. It did work out to a certain degree with Starling Marte. So you have to continue to do this for the Pirates, and he is the guy you want to do it. He's got all the tools, all the skill set, but he also has the right head on his shoulders. You saw clips where he was signing every autograph for everybody who was waiting for him 30, 40, 50 minutes after a game. So to have that type of guy at 19, mature, just give him the bag. And then from a Pirate standpoint, the biggest benefit for that is you don't have to have this, oh, should it be on the opening day roster or not? No, he's there. And he's got,
Right.
I'm going to be there, 0 for 30 money. So if he goes 0 for his first 30, he's still going to be there in the major leagues and he's not going to be moved off. And that's exactly what you'd want as a fan.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, again, to your point, it's a two-way street. It takes both parties to agree, obviously. But I think this type of deal is a no-brainer for the Pirates because, okay, what if he doesn't pan out? Let's be honest. If he doesn't pan out, it's not going to matter for the Pirates anyway. Like, I don't mean to, I don't mean to be too, frank about, but they need him to be good anyway. So you might as well just take the swing. In order for them to be competitive, they need to take risks like this. They just do. It's just the realities. There's no reason from their perspective not to. Again, I don't know the exact numbers and we don't know exactly what it would take to get it done. But I think I think that those numbers are pretty accurate from what I've seen as well. And I think this is the exact type of thing. You gave some good examples of that. I think this is the exact type of things that the Pirates should be doing when they get a prospect at this level. You have to be risky. You have to take a risk with this because you have to get some guys on good deals in order to compete for the Pirates.
From the Pirates to the Penguins now, we said for the Penguins, the biggest thing coming out of the Olympic break was you had to get a few points early on, and they've gotten those, and they've looked good doing it. They had the little bit, that down game against the Rangers where they started strong and faded, but they came back really strong on Sunday. So the Penguins are building up, and they're doing it with a team you can kind of get behind too.
Yeah, that Vegas game may have been one of their best games all year, just in general. I mean, all three phases look good, just across the board. That Rangers game was weird. They could have won that game. That game looked like it might be over in the first period. One concern I did want to point out, again, 5 points in 5 points out of 6 in 3 games. You're going to take all day, every day against anyone. Literally, it could be the 3 worst teams in the league. You're going to take that. Rangers are not good. They look really bad in that first period. But again, it's hockey. You're going to have games that go that way. But the one concern, if you look into the numbers, the faceoff circle is concerning me a little bit. Not shocking when you have your best faceoff man by far in Crosby, your best player, obviously, and Crosby out. You're going to struggle there. I think we're used to them just being so deep at center that you just don't even have to worry about it. With Malkin on the wing now, you are relying a lot on Kindle right now. That opens the door for maybe a trade of a center, for a center, I should say. So it could be interesting. And all of a sudden, they could go a couple different ways at the deadline. And again, they're horrible in shootouts. It's just something you got to have. It is what it is. It has no impact on the playoffs. 1-8 in shootouts is wild. I mean, if they were just 500 in shootouts, they could be competing with Carolina right now for the 1 seed. But the good news is that doesn't translate whatsoever to the playoffs. They're bad in overtime and especially in shootouts. It's not relevant for the playoffs. So though I do think the face-off circle concerns me a little bit, but you already have the fix long-term for that on your roster. It is just a question of, can they get through that, or is that going to come back to bite them this month with Crosby out? Obviously, we didn't even touch on that, but the big news is the Crosby injury, obviously. Differing reports on that. But it does seem like, another 3 or so weeks. But the good news is
you don't know in hockey
serious.
Injuries. We don't really know.
Well, no, I guess the reason they were saying there's differing reports in general too was it was a 4-week injury, but because he was trying to play and he wasn't like back in the US rehabbing. So it's a little bit weird because what happened during the Olympics and technically he was trying to play. So it's, to your point, hockey injuries are so all over the place. But the good news is it isn't a long-term serious thing. It's just timing couldn't be worse in terms of a condensed schedule in March, tough schedule in March.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was kind of said the same thing, Raquel's not a center. So like you can't really even talk about faceoffs when he's the one who's taking them against the line one center for other teams. I am really interested to see what happens in the crease for the Penguins as we get to the trade deadline. I think Silovs has done enough to definitely be one of those 2 goalies. He's actually played very well, not in shootouts, but everywhere else.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect is Miroshov is still just looking so good in the minors.
Yeah.
And when you think about just riding that hot goalie and having someone that you can just kind of lean on and see what happens, he's still the roll of the dice I like the most for the playoffs. So that brings me to Stuart Skinner. Is he someone that really isn't even in the Penguins plans going into the rest of the year? Is he someone they might flip again for other aspects? And you kind of look at that Kulak trade for Girard, where they're giving up someone who's playing well for them for someone who's fits into the roster today, but then you also get a second. So it's like, Dubas is just doubling down on the future while trying to play for this year a little bit as well. So it's interesting to see what will happen, but really excited about, I think my big takeaways are that I love Miroshov still in net. I think he's still the future, and I think that's going to be this year, and that'll give them best chance to win the cup if he's that guy. But at the same time, the next month is going to be a tough standpoint for the Penguins when it comes to depth, especially down the middle, like you mentioned. Having Raquel be one of your main centers in your top 2 lines, it's tough to win a lot of games with him in that spot. So you got to have Kindrel step up. He has the last few games, but a young guy continuing to do that game after game is where you kind of get that wear down. So he might be able to do it this month, but he's going to run out of steam for the playoffs type of thing as well, is where my head's at.
Yeah, and it is worth noting, too, they do have the most top 3 picks over the next 4 years. So they have the draft capital if they want to make a move. I don't want them to take a huge swing here. Again, it's hard to say because I don't know what the move would be. Not that I would be completely opposed to it, but I don't want them to really like rock the boat for something that may or may not even help them in the short term. So I did like the Girard move they made in general. I think they essentially traded. They got 5 years younger. Yeah, that was a win. At some point, they're going to lose a trade again. I promise you. At some point, they will actually lose a trade. But that one is another no-brainer. It's kind of like the opposite. For such a long time, they're up against the cap. You're always making the other side of a move like this. Whereas I think on paper, this is a pretty obvious move you make. They may have literally gotten the better player 5 years younger and been given a second round pick to make it happen. It's just one of those things when you're a team like Colorado where you're up against the cap, you just have to get creative, especially right before the trade deadline. Again, we've usually been on the other side of that. The last 20 years we've been on the other side of that coin. I think that was a no-brainer trade that he made in general. Again, when you're projected to have 48 million in cap space next year, those are trades you're going to make all day for sure. So again, I'm excited to see what they do in the next week. I'm hearing some Shane Wright from Seattle. That's the type of move I'd be really interested. Former first overall pick, has struggled a little bit. I wouldn't bet on that, obviously, but I'd be very interested to see how much it would take. They'd probably have to overpay. They could do it if they have the draft capital to do it. I'm not saying I expect that, but that is one name I've seen online. I'm not as high on pushing Mershov, along, just because their teams are super sensitive with goalies just in general. You don't want to shock them and ruin their confidence. Kind of like baseball in a way that you don't want to ruin someone's confidence, but he's clearly the most talented. I think you had written down that save he made, I think it was this weekend, was ridiculous. You can't, again, we're talking about young guys being excited about, you can't not be excited about him. Maybe they move their other goalie in the system because of that. So that could be something to keep an eye on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So maybe they, yeah. So it should be exciting this next week. The moves will be made obviously by the time we talk again. So I'm excited to see what they do, but they could go so many different ways. The fact that he got them so many picks and they have much draft capital just gives them so much flexibility in general to do whatever they think makes sense.
All right. And we'll wrap up today talking about Pitt. They are actually starting spring practice. So snow is on the ground here again, but football is back in the air. What does this mean for Pitt? What does that look like from a depth chart standpoint and things of that nature, Justin?
Yeah, we'll start hearing about some of the battles. So I think spring practice is probably more important, more relevant than it used to be because of the whole NIL deal. So we'll really start hearing about some of the position battles, some of the newcomers, which again, unfortunate or not, it's just the reality. There's going to be a lot of learning some of these guys, especially this year with some of the turnover on the roster. But to your point, just having spring practice back is fun. We're one step closer to real football, which is the real takeaway. Also nice to see Kyle Lewis had a solid combine. Nothing incredible. There is more talk of him playing safety than linebacker, which, again, what that really means, I still think he's just between the two positions. So I don't even know if that matters that much, but he has a solid combine, which is good to see as well.
Yeah, I heard he had the extra thick shoes on, so he got up to a bigger height. The thing that's really important to Kyle Lewis. Well, I think everyone knew he was going to knock it out of the park for the other aspects. He's one of those, when you see that RAS score for Kyle Lewis, he's above average on everything except for size, where he's like very below average. So
yeah, the weight's the big thing. It's the 220 is the issue at linebacker, like the height and the weight, obviously.
Yeah. So, you got to have a team that can make use of that. I think he'll find his spot. It won't be.
Des Reed didn't do anything, but it'll be interesting to see Des Reed, where he ends up going, and similar situation. I mean, height and weight are really the discussion, and his ability to pass block there.
That was my question. Can Des Reed pass block? Because I feel like that's how you get on an NFL field in the
especially because what he does. Yeah, especially because what he does well and in the receiving game, you can't just go out and every defense know, okay, well, this guy can't pass block to save his life, so we're going to send a bunch and just get to the quarterback. So I hope it works out, because I'd love to see him in a role where he can get the ball in space. But yeah, that's going to be the question. It'll be the question that someone has to answer. Is this guy an undrafted free agent or 7th round pick, or can we take him in like the 5th? And again, that'll determine that.
What would you say, and this is probably a topic for a different day, but where did you say Des Reed ranks for Pitt running backs, say like the last 10, 15 years, since like a Dion Lewis cutoff?
They've had some pretty, I mean, you had Olsen, Hall, Konnor. I mean, Connor's going to be one on that list. It's tough because he didn't play his whole career there, so it's a little bit hard to compare him to like an Olsen or even a Hall. And they had, an Izzy obviously as well. So like they've actually had, kind of sneaky some solid backs. I don't think you certainly can't have him above Konnor or Izzy. He'd probably be in that tier with Olsen, Hall. I'm sure I'm forgetting people. We'd have to actually go through it. But yeah, I think he's probably in that tier-ish. It's just very hard to compare him to some of these guys that spent their whole career there.
Yeah.
He essentially had 1.25 seasons.
Yeah. And he got hurt in a few times too. I think his talent was pretty clearly above an Olsen or Darren Hall. And they had
very
a couple
different
huge
back,
games.
yeah.
They kind of stood out. But yeah, absolutely. So I think the last thing you had on the Pitt rundown today was the Narduzzi head coaching rankings. He slotted in at number 6 in between SMU's head coach and Duke's Manny Diaz. Where do you think that lands? I feel like when I read through these coaches for me for the ACC, just makes me feel a little sad about the ACC in general. There's just not a lot of names that kind of jump out at you. But
No, Bill
to
Belichick
your
just
point,
doesn't do it for you.
yeah,
If I would have told you this list and told you Bill Belichick was going to be 14 on the list like 2 years ago, you'd been like, what is going on? This is a bigger discussion just in general. I don't, and this list, there was some talk about this just in general on Pitt Twitter, and this week. I've seen lists, they're all, it's coaches. So like you have to, it's hard to compare them in general. You're talking relative to the situation they're in, the talent they have, and things like that. I'm all over I've seen rankings all over the place from Narduzzi. I think this is the perfect list, which is why I wanted to bring it up. So basically, Cristobal, Dabo, James Franklin, Brom at Louisville, and Lashley at SMU, the ones ahead of him. I think this is almost a perfect list. I have very few. It's just weird seeing Belichick at 14, but otherwise, I have very few complaints with this list in general. I feel like when I talk to Pitt fans and just a lot of people in Pittsburgh who, pull for Pitt, the first thing they'll bring up is Nard. And I don't know if this is just natural. Everyone hates the coach, the starting quarterback, things like that when you're talking sports. But it's always like, oh, Narduzzi, they need to get Narduzzi out of there. I don't understand what the expectation is. I literally specifically remember when they hired him saying, if he can win an ACC championship once a decade and compete for an ACC championship, every third or fifth year, that's all. That's all we expect. You have to remember where they were at when he came there after Chris and Todd Graham, where the program was. But I've never really understood. I have plenty of issues with, and I'm sure we'll get to them during the season, with certain quirks and things with Narduzzi. Every coach has that. Chris used to drive me insane with his 2-minute drill. And there's things that really bother me about Narduzzi's defense, but I don't know what you would expect from Narduzzi if you think they need to move on this second, or he's a terrible coach, or he's perfectly ranked here, is my takeaway in general, why I wanted to share this.
Yeah, I think he's proven he can win with good players and a good squad. Now it's really not up to him as a recruiter to get that good squad and good
Right.
players, but it'll be more on the Alan Green shoulders and things of that nature. So I think that's really the interesting part from our Narduzzi standpoint. And really, when you look at it from a Pitt grass is greener, Pitt should have learned a lot about the Jamie Dixon saga and things of that nature. I feel like there's sometimes where you can kind of just accept that stability, and that's not a bad thing. That high end upside, where you find that next hot head coach has never really been Pitt's MO. And I don't think that really is how they fit to be successful as a program. I think they're better with that coach that can be there for a year, build that identity. And he certainly, fits that mold where he's a Western PA guy.
Yeah. Again, I've always felt like the fit was good. Again, I will have plenty of things that drive me insane, with Narduzzi and his defense, but he's developed really well. He's developed some players, a lot of players while he's been there. He's taken talent that, if you look at year in, year out, the recruiting rankings that have been lower, and he's done more with it. And I think a lot of that is he's very good at finding talent for his system and developing it. What worries me moving forward is, you saw what happened in the portal this year. He finds talent, develops it, and then, 4 of the top 10 teams in spending come and take some of their players. It's just the reality of nowadays. It might be harder to win that way moving forward, but he has done a good job of that. So I think this ranking is perfect. It's exactly where I probably would have had him. I'm a big fan of a couple of the coaches in front of him too. So I think this is he's perfectly slotted here. All right. So our nostalgia segment, we wanted to do another fun one. We're going to go draft NFL jersey. So helmet, uniform, the whole thing. The caveat is it's only primary jersey. So no throwbacks, no alternates. I'm sure we'll do that at some point as well. I'm a big jersey guy. I have a lot of friends who have strong opinions about my opinions on jerseys. So I'm happy they're not here so I can just talk without them disagreeing with me. But Joe, I'll let you pick again. It seems to have worked out decently well for me last week. So do you want to go first, or do you want the wraparound in this draft?
I'll take the wraparound today. I went first last.
Okay. I was hoping you would go first this time, but you picked correctly. I'm going to pander on my first pick. There's probably a handful I could have gone here, but I'm going to go with the Steelers first overall. Top 3 jersey. I think more people will agree with me on this podcast than not. So I'm going to go 1 Steelers.
Does it have the block numbers? Because that's key for me. I feel like without the block
No,
numbers,
that's
I don't know. I like that.
well, no, that would be an alternate. But yeah, I do like the block numbers though. Great
I
face
think
mask.
for me, on my side, I'm going to go Chargers with the baby blues that they have. I feel like the upgrade on that side. And then I will say the Packers are a very iconic helmet jersey combo. There's really no one else like them when you got that yellow and the green.
Yeah, those are solid picks for sure. I'm going to go 49ers with this pick. And I'm going to go Cowboys as well with the second pick.
Cowboys was who I was going to swing back to. So definitely still on the Cowboys. What is the Seahawks primary jersey right now?
It's the blue. Well, you could do any. There's multiple pants, but it's the I don't even know how to describe that blue one with all the highlighter aspects to it.
Not the one that I would like that I'm thinking of.
No, that would be a throwback. That would be my 101 if we were doing a throwback.
Yeah, I think the Seahawks are still tempting. I'm going to go Bengals. I've always loved the helmet with the
Okay.
stripes when it's not a logo.
I'll say
And
this. I
then,
had that on my list, and I thought it was a hot take to have it. Like on my, I have 10 written down. I had that on mine, and I thought it was a hot take to have it. So I don't hate that, honestly.
yeah, and then last to round out the squad from a jersey standpoint, man, I think just trying to do one last loop through my head on any of the squad, see if I'm missing anybody. But I think I'll go Rams as my last team.
Okay, Joe goes with the team that's changing their uniforms in 3 weeks. I'm gonna go. I got my whole pick of my top 6 here, so I'm gonna go. Was not expecting this. I like both of these a lot. I'm gonna go Raiders here. I feel
I
like
like
that's a
black. I could see that.
solid. I almost went Colts. I really like the Colts. It's more the helmet and the logo, I guess, than anything. But so our picks, I went Steelers, 49ers, Raiders, Cowboys, Raiders, and you went Chargers, Packers, Bengals, Rams for your top 4. One of the reasons we did this, like I said, that there's 5 teams that are unveiling new uniforms coming up. They'll be doing their reveals. The Falcons just talked about doing theirs, or I guess they showed their players theirs, and they'll be doing those in the coming weeks. The other aspect too is I do want to reiterate, I kind of messed this up last week with or I shouldn't say I messed it up. I wasn't sure exactly how we were going to do it. You can comment with who you think won the draft in the comments. You can share yours as well. That's great. But make sure you comment with your whoever you think won. And also, we will have it up under posts on our main page. Under posts, you will see an actual poll on who won the jersey draft, Joe or Justin. You can vote on there as well. And then, like I said, we'll be keeping standings. We have one more thing to run before we find out who won week 1. I like the way it's trending, but we'll see how that works out. And then these are both good drafts, so we'll see how this week 2 works. And we'll be doing this as we go through the summer as well.
Justin's the one counting the votes, so if you guys figure out who wins at the end, there's already an asterisk there because I haven't seen any of these votes.
Yeah.
So, if he says it's trending towards him for the movie draft, we already know it's rigged because there was a clear winner last week for that one.
To be honest, I would have voted for you, but it is what it is.
If you guys are still listening, you're the real one. So thanks again for hanging with us on another Wednesday. We'll see you next week.
See you later.